The first thing Oren Kessler noticed was that the gravity was slightly off, just enough to make his knees ache when he jogged, but not enough to complain about. He had been on the Elari campus for 6 weeks, part of a controversial Earth exchange program designed to introduce alien university students to the concept of human resilience through direct observation. Oren, a 32-year-old paramedic with a knack for cracking bad jokes under pressure, had been selected less for his academic merits and more for his history of surviving ridiculous situations without dying. He was mid-stride around the central quad, an oval track made of some gel-like substance that rebounded underfoot when a loud whoop sounded behind him. He turned his head and saw the green, translucent form of Tala sprinting toward him. Tala was one of the 6 Elari students assigned to shadow Oren. "Oren," Tala called with a flapping lilt in his voice, "you are exceeding the safe exertion threshold for your species in this gravity ratio. Please slow." "I'm not sprinting, Talu, I'm jogging," Oren said, breathing a little heavier than he wanted to admit. "It's called cardio. But your face is red and you are leaking from the pores again. That sweat? It cools me down. You are evaporating to regulate core heat?" Tala's glowing eye nodes pulsed. "Fascinating. Self-liquidation as a cooling strategy." Oren turned his head forward again and kept running. "You wanted to see resilience, right? This is what it looks like. Pushing through discomfort." Just as he rounded the final stretch, his foot landed half on the edge of the gel track and half off. His ankle rolled with a sickening twist. He went down hard, the breath knocked out of him, and the world spun sideways. He lay still for a moment, pain radiating in sharp pulses from his right ankle. Then he let out a short, airy laugh. "Of course. Classic." Tala knelt beside him, eyes scanning. "You suffered trauma. You were laughing. Is this a neural misfire?" "No," Oren said, wincing. "This is the part where I laugh so I don't yell. Give me a minute." He tried to sit up, groaning as he shifted. The ankle was already swelling. He knew it wasn't a simple twist. Maybe not broken, but definitely bad. "You require medical attention," Tala said, and activated a comm link embedded in his wrist. "Requesting transport to infirmary. Human Oren has compromised his joint integrity." "I can walk," Oren muttered, attempting to stand. The moment he put weight on his foot, pain lanced up his leg and he dropped back down. "Nope. Scratch that. Ambulance sounds good." The Elari Medical Center was a dome of humming lights and antiseptic mist. Oren lay on a padded table while a scanning device orbited his leg. The Elari medic, a thin, angular being named Resh, examined the results on a floating panel. "There is no bone fragmentation," Resh said. "However, the ligament has suffered a high-degree strain. You will require immobilization and assisted movement for 7 Earth days, followed by mobility exercises for 3 weeks. "Yeah, sounds about right," Oren said, resting his head back. "Grade 2 sprain. That's a fun one." "You are oddly composed," Resh noted. "Your pain signals are elevated." "I've had worse," Oren said. "I've been hit by a scooter in downtown Chicago. That one cracked 3 ribs. Talu leaned in closer. "You have sustained multiple injuries in your lifetime and yet continue to participate in activities that risk further injury? Welcome to being human." The next morning, Oren sat in a hover chair that hummed softly as it drifted down the dormitory corridor. Tala followed closely behind, holding a notepad-sized data slate. "Your sleep cycle was interrupted by pain," Talu observed. "You rejected the sedative offered." "It made my mouth taste like old socks," Oren said. "I'll manage." "You continue to operate under duress." "This is intentional." "Not exactly. It's practical. You responded to trauma with humor and now proceed with limited mobility, refusing full rest. Is this a cultural expectation or psychological compulsion?" "It's me being stubborn." Talu paused, antennae twitching. "I must record that as a subcategory of resilience behavior. Stubbornness. Is this a genetic trait?" "I think it's more of a family thing," Oren said. "My dad once built a snow shelter with a fractured wrist and didn't even notice until the next morning." Later that day, Oren sat in the observation lab while the Elari students presented case analyses of what they had seen so far. He was the subject of most of them, Talu's presentation included a clip of Oren falling on the track, followed by a slow-motion replay of him laughing on the ground. This moment, Talu said, pointing to the projection, demonstrates an ambiguous yet critical aspect of human resilience. Emotional disassociation from pain, followed by humor, appears to function as an adaptive mechanism. Oren raised a hand. It's not disassociation. It's more like reframing. You make the pain a punchline, it feels smaller. Another alien student, Miv, blinked slowly. You minimized the experience of injury through comedy? No, I didn't minimize it. It still hurts. I just didn't want it to ruin my day. Fascinating, Miv said. Your species processes trauma through narrative absurdity. The discussions continued for hours, Oren answering questions even as his ankle throbbed. When the lab session finally ended, he maneuvered the hoverchair back toward his room. Talu accompanied him silently. Halfway down the corridor, Oren pulled the chair to a stop. Hey, Talu. Yes. Why do you care so much about this resilience thing? Talu hesitated. Our species does not recover well from trauma. Physically, yes. Emotionally, no. We fracture internally. A single incident can render one of us inert for a cycle. Oren nodded slowly. So you're hoping to learn how to bounce back? Yes. You laugh at pain. We cannot understand that. I don't always laugh. Sometimes I scream into a pillow. Talu tilted his head. That was not in your file. Yeah, well, Oren said, guiding the chair into his room, not everything fits on paper. The recovery was slow. The swelling reduced after 4 days, and Oren began using crutches. He hated them. Every stair was a battle, every door a puzzle. But he pushed through, doing the physical therapy exercises assigned by the medic. One afternoon, as he tried to balance on a foam pad while doing calf raises, he lost his footing and collapsed onto the mat, groaning. Talu, watching nearby, moved forward. Should I assist? No, Oren said, breathless. Let me get up. You are delaying recovery by overexerting. I'm doing what I can handle. You fell. Yeah. And I'll get up. He rolled over, gritted his teeth, and pushed himself upright with his crutches. Sweat ran down his face. He didn't laugh this time. Talu was quiet for a moment. You accept setbacks as part of progress. Exactly. And you do not interpret pain as failure. It's part of the process. Talu tapped something into his slate. You are teaching us more than expected. A week later, Oren walked without crutches, limping slightly. The Elari students gathered one last time before the program closed. Each gave a summary of their findings. When Talu spoke, he showed a graph of Oren's recovery timeline, annotated with emotional responses and behavior patterns. Resilience in the human context is not defined by lack of pain but by persistence despite it. Humor is not denial but a tool. Endurance is not stoicism but adaptation. These traits are not uniform across all humans, but in Oren we observed sufficient consistency to suggest biological and cultural reinforcement. Oren stepped forward. I'm not a superhero. I complain a lot in private. Sometimes I feel sorry for myself. But then I get up, because that's what I've seen everyone around me do. My mom, my friends, even strangers. Talu turned to him. We thank you for your transparency. Your example provides us a model imperfect but functional. A soft chime ended the session. The program was over. As Oren packed his things, Talu entered the room holding a small device. A gift. It records and replays your vocal patterns from key moments, especially when you laughed after the fall. We found it instructive. Oren took the device with a grin. You guys are weird, but thanks. Talu's gaze settled on him. You are resilient, not because you do not break, but because you continue after breaking. Oren nodded. That's the idea. He boarded the shuttle home that evening, sore but walking on his own. Behind him, 6 alien students returned to their studies, now carrying the image of a man who laughed through pain, stumbled through recovery, and never stopped moving forward. 2 days after his final presentation, Oren found himself sitting cross-legged on the cold composite floor of a narrow observation room. His right ankle, still recovering, rested on a low cushion shaped like a sea cucumber. A panel in the wall displayed a slowly rotating schematic of a shuttle engine, but nobody in the room was paying attention to it. Talu and 3 other Elari students surrounded him, each holding a different object. Talu had a transparent cube filled with shifting sand. Vesh held a folded strip of thermoplastic that changed colors when touched. Lilu carried a small, wriggling plant in a sealed container. And Yeren, who rarely spoke, was balancing 2 polished stones on a plank suspended by magnetic nodes. "You told us humans use stress toys," said Lilu, her eye rings contracting in a ripple of interest. "We are attempting to understand their function." Oren took the cube from Talu and watched the sand inside pour from one corner to another as he tilted it. "These aren't stress toys," he said. "This one's more like a desktop distraction. It's not about stopping stress, it's about giving your brain something low stakes to focus on when everything else feels like it's closing in." "Why not simply remove yourself from the source of anxiety?" asked Vesh. "Because you often can't. We get stuck in traffic, get called into meetings we didn't ask for, get news we weren't ready for. You can't always hit pause." Talu leaned forward. "So these objects are substitutes for control? Something like that. They let you feel like you're doing something when you can't do anything." The plant in Lilu's jar pulsed faintly, a soft glow emanating from its tendrils. She tapped the glass and it curled inward. "This one reacts to temperature and sound. It retreats when startled." "Like a lot of people I know," Oren said. "But we don't get to live in jars." Yeren, still balancing the stones, spoke for the first time. "Your species does not retreat when overwhelmed?" Oren looked at him. "Oh, we absolutely do. We just pretend we're not." A low chime sounded from the hallway. The designated rest interval had ended. Yeren carefully set down the stones. "We will reconvene in 1 hour. You are invited to join our digestion period. No offense, but your food smells like warm algae and printer ink. None taken. We find your nutrient bars indistinguishable from packaging foam." They filed out, leaving Oren alone in the room with the gently spinning schematic. He stood slowly, testing his weight on the ankle. It ached, especially toward the front where the ligament had stretched too far. The swelling had gone down, but the stiffness remained. He flexed his foot, winced, then muttered something inaudible and limped toward the hall. 40 minutes later, he was in the campus greenhouse, a massive dome of filtered light and high humidity where Elari students cultivated biosensitive flora. The air was thick with the scent of wet minerals and something metallic, like rusted coins. Talu emerged from behind a vertical vine lattice, holding a shallow basin of gelatinous moss. "You found it. Wasn't hard." I followed the smell of compost and existential confusion. "We study the feedback loop between mood and microflora. Some of these plants respond to emotional fluctuations." Oren raised an eyebrow. "You're telling me these plants can sense if I'm having a bad day?" "Not sense. Reflect. Their pigments shift in relation to electrochemical variants." "Great. Now even the plants judge me." Talus set the basin down on a pedestal and motioned for Oren to lean in. "This one is particularly reactive. Place your hand near the fronds." Oren extended his left hand over the moss. It began to ripple with slow, purple waves, then flashed a streak of gold near the center. Talat tilted his head. "That is unusual." "What, does gold mean I'm about to explode?" "It usually indicates a state of contradiction. Elevated stress paired with activated pleasure centers." Oren exhaled through his nose. "Yeah, that tracks." Talat studied him. "You are recovering physically, but your internal state remains unstable. I didn't expect a twisted ankle to fix my life. You deflect again. It's a habit." They sat on a low bench near a cluster of photosensitive bulbs. A few of them expanded as Oren's shadow fell across them. Talu broke the silence. "Do you have a trauma you consider pivotal? I thought you said you didn't study psychology." "I don't. I'm asking as a colleague." Oren ran a hand through his hair. "I was on call during a building collapse 5 years ago. Downtown. A gas main blew. I pulled 3 people out. 1 didn't make it. I still remember the sound his ribs made when I tried compressions. Talu remained quiet. I had to fill out paperwork while his blood was still under my fingernails. Oren continued. And then I went home and microwaved leftover pizza. You ate. I didn't want to, but yeah. I sat on the floor, stared at the wall, and ate cold pizza because it felt like the only normal thing I could do. That meal was symbolic. No, it was just pizza. But I guess, yeah, maybe, it was a way to remind myself I was still a person. Talu absorbed that for a long moment. One of the plants nearby shifted color from pale green to burnt orange. You metabolize grief through routine. Some of us do. Some drink. Some run. Some break things they don't care about. We all find something. Talu's gaze lingered on the orange plant. If your species is so adaptable, why do so many of you still suffer long-term? Because adaptability isn't immunity. It just means we survive long enough to figure out what hurts. Oren stood, wincing as his ankle reminded him of its limitations. I gotta move. If I sit too long, everything locks up. Talu rose as well. May I accompany you? Sure. Let's walk slow. My ankle's still on the fence about this whole mobility thing. They moved through the greenhouse, past rows of bioluminescent moss and spiraled fungal towers that pulsed faintly with internal heat. Tala pointed to a particularly tall vine with a dozen curling tips. This species continues to grow even after partial severance. It redirects its energy to adjacent nodes. Sounds familiar. Later that night, Oren sat alone in the dormitory's communal lounge. No one else was around. The lights had dimmed to their nocturnal hue, casting the room in a soft violet tint. He pulled off his compression wrap and rotated his foot slowly. The joint still clicked. He massaged the side of his ankle gently, pressing just behind the lateral bone where it was most tender. He counted the seconds between pulses of discomfort. There was a soft knock. Lilu entered, carrying a small, flat object wrapped in insulating mesh. You left this in the greenhouse, she said. Oren took the package and unwrapped it. Inside was a printout and actual sheet of flexible paper, rare on Elari campuses of the gold-streaked moss reading from earlier. We thought you might want a copy. Thanks. Lilu hesitated, then sat opposite him. May I ask something? Go ahead. Do you believe your resilience is sustainable? He folded the paper carefully. No, but it's renewable. She tilted her head. Explain. I break down. I rest. I get up again. Not always better, not always stronger. But I'm still moving. That's the point. It doesn't have to last forever. It just has to last long enough. Lilu tapped the edge of the table. We do not conceptualize endurance that way. Maybe you should start. She stood, nodded once, and left without another word. Oren leaned back, the paper still in his hand. The ankle still throbbed. The day had pressed in heavy and strange. But the ache was familiar now, and the silence didn't feel like absence anymore. He exhaled slowly. The ceiling's ambient glow shifted slightly, indicating the start of the nocturnal quiet cycle. He didn't sleep for hours, but when he finally did, it was without dreams. The rain on Melivar campus wasn't wet, not in the earth sense. Anyway, it drifted down in thin, static charged filaments that evaporated before hitting the ground, leaving only a faint crackle in the air and a metallic tang at the back of the throat. Oren sat beneath one of the arboreal light towers, its bark pulsing with a slow, amber heartbeat. His ankle was almost back to full function, but he still favored the left leg slightly, especially when the artificial humidity shifted. Talu approached carrying a thin, semi-transparent panel. There's a final colloquium in the North Sphere tonight. Vesh believes you should attend. Colloquium, Oren repeated. So, one of those events where I sit quietly while people use big words and try not to make eye contact? They will be presenting interpretations of your behavioral patterns as applied to high-stress adaptation models. I feel like a lab rat with personality. You are the prototype. Oren exhaled and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You ever think maybe none of this should have worked? Alien students studying a human who knows more about neck braces than Nobel Prizes. Talu sat beside him on the bench, folding the panel neatly. And yet, it worked. Barely. I sprained my ankle trying to prove I could jog in low gravity. That's not exactly inspirational biography material. You misunderstand the scale. You are not here to impress. You are here to illustrate. Oren scratched his jaw. Illustrate what? That persistence is not exclusive to brilliance. They sat in silence under the fizzing sky for a few minutes before Talu turned slightly. Vesh has requested to interview you privately. He claims you exhibit an incongruent response to failure. Oren laughed once. That sounds about right. He's in the kinetic lab. He wants to discuss your, how did he phrase it, refusal to accept non-functionality as terminal. Sounds like I'm being summoned for a philosophical inquisition. He's bringing snacks. All right, I'm in. The kinetic lab was a cavernous dome filled with suspended structures and rotating models that hovered in place, reacting to invisible pressure currents. Vesh waited near the central gyroscopic ring, a pouch of glossy, blue-green pods opened beside him. Oren eyed the pods. These the ones that make your tongue vibrate? Only temporarily. Pass. Vesh gestured to a low platform. Sit. I want to understand the moment you chose to stand after falling. Oren raised an eyebrow. You're not going to ask about the injury itself? I read the report. Ligament overextension, moderate swelling, limited instability. What matters is what you did afterward. Oren dropped onto the platform. That's easy. I didn't want to lie there while a bunch of translucent aliens hovered over me with clipboards. Talu, standing nearby, clarified. We do not use clipboards. It's a metaphor. Vesh crouched beside Oren. You could have called for assistance immediately. You delayed. Because I didn't want to make it a whole thing. You sacrificed efficiency for pride. Oren shook his head. Not pride. Autonomy. There's a difference. Vesh tapped the platform's edge. We do not conceptualize those separately. If we are impaired, we declare it. There is no shame in incapacity. Same on Earth in theory. But shame sneaks in anyway. You grow up watching people push through pain and it wires something into your brain. Makes you think being functional is the same as being valuable. Talu tilted his head. Is that why you refused the mobility brace on day 3? Because it squeaked, Oren said. Every step sounded like I was crushing a duck. That is not a valid clinical objection. Oren leaned back, bracing on his hands. You wanted to understand resilience, but it's not some noble, shining thing. Half the time, it's just stubbornness with nowhere to go. Vesh nodded slowly. Then perhaps your defiance is the core variable. It's not defiance. It's momentum. You stop too long, everything catches up to you. So you keep moving. Even if you limp. Talu tapped a control node and a soft vibration passed through the floor. We've compiled your data into a continuity profile. Emotional, physical, behavioral. We're going to present it tonight. Oren narrowed his eyes. You're putting together a highlight reel of me falling downstairs and complaining about cafeteria lighting? It's more nuanced than that. I sure hope so. Later, when the colloquium began, the North Sphere hummed with the low murmur of Elari conversation. Translucent bodies moved with precise grace, and data projections hovered like musical notes in the air. Oren stood near the back, his hands in the pockets of the borrowed formal wrap he still didn't fully understand how to wear correctly. Talu stepped to the center of the platform where the ambient lights adjusted to his presence. We present our final synthesis of subject Oren Kessler, human paramedic, anomaly of resilience. Oren muttered under his breath. Great title. Real flattering. Talu continued without pause. Our observations reveal a framework of behavior inconsistent with Elari models of trauma response. Subject displays an aversion to internal stasis, prioritizes kinetic engagement over cognitive recalibration, and demonstrates recursive adaptation under compounding stressors. A projection spiraled upward, displaying a timeline of Oren's daily activities during his recovery. Points of deviation, moments of improvisation, and unexpected endurance spikes were highlighted in shifting colors. Vesh stepped forward. We initially hypothesized that resilience would emerge through systemic efficiency. Instead, we found it in improvisation, in consistency, in what humans call making it up as you go. The crowd rustled slightly. For Elari, that was the equivalent of gasping. Talu added, "This suggests resilience is not a trait, but a sequence, a loop. Fall, react, reframe, proceed. Not flawless, not linear, but persistent." Oren scratched his neck. "You know, you could have just said he keeps trying and saved everyone a lot of time." Lilu, seated in the front row, turned slightly. They require complexity to validate simplicity. The presentation concluded with a playback of Oren rising unassisted from the foam mat during early therapy. His face strained, sweat visible on his brow, jaw tight. Then movement. Controlled. Determined. The footage froze mid-motion. A hush settled. Oren sighed. "You're all staring at me like I cured gravity." Vesh turned. "You demonstrated sustainability under unpredictable conditions." "That is valuable. It's also kind of sad, isn't it?" Oren said, "that it takes falling on my face for people to realize humans are tougher than we look." Talu approached him after the crowd began to disperse. "You changed how we define recovery. That's a lot for one twisted ankle." "It was not the injury. It was the choice to move after." Oren looked out across the room. The projections were fading, the conversations softening. Somewhere, someone played a stringless instrument that resonated through the floor more than the air. "You know," Oren said, "if you'd told me a few months ago that aliens would be dissecting my pain tolerance like it was a mystery of the cosmos, I'd have laughed. And yet, you agreed to come. I didn't expect it to matter." "It did." Oren nodded once. "All right, then maybe it was worth the limp." Talu tilted his head. "You are cleared for interstellar travel now. Will you return home?" "Yeah. Got people waiting. Bills to ignore. Coffee to drink. We will miss your anomalies." Oren grinned. "Try not to sprain anything in my absence." Talu looked thoughtful. "If we do, we will attempt to laugh." "Good start." The shuttle departed at early rotation just before the rain began again. Oren sat by the window watching the static filaments dance against the glass. His ankle wasn't perfect, but it held steady. Behind him, the Elari campus resumed its quiet rhythm. Papers would be written. Models adjusted. But one thing had changed, subtle yet permanent, the understanding that resilience wasn't about perfection or even strength. It was about movement. And Oren had never really stopped.